Well, this is the Lone Star Ranger, Book 2. It looks like we're fixing to finish this ride. So saddle up. Let's see where it goes. Dwayne returned to Fairdale and camped in the mesquite till 23rd of the month. The few days seemed endless. All he could think of was the hour in which he must disgrace Ray Longstreth was slowly but inexorably coming. In that waiting time, he learned what love was and also duty. When the day at last dawned, he rode like one possessed down the rough slope, hurtling stones and crashing through the brush with a sound in his ears that was not at all harsh rush of the wind, sometimes dragged at him. Apparently one side of his mind was unalterably fixed, while the other was hurrying conglomeration of flashes of thought, reception of sensations. He could not get calmness. By and by, almost involuntarily, he hurried faster on. Action seemed to make his state less oppressive. It eased the weight. But the farther he went on, the harder it was to continue. Had he turned his back upon love, happiness, and perhaps life itself? There seemed no use to go on further until he was absolutely sure of himself. Dwayne received a clear warning thought that such work as seemed haunting and driving him could never be carried out in the mood under which he labored. He hung on to that thought. Several times he slowed up and then stopped, only to go on again. At length, as he mounted a low ridge, Fairdale lay right below him, and the bright and green before him not far away, and the sight was a conclusive check. There were mesquites on the ridge, and Dwayne sought the shade beneath them. It was the noon hour, with hot, glary sun and no wind. Here Dwayne had to have out his fight. Dwayne was utterly unlike himself. He could not bring the old self back. He was not the same man he once had been. But he could understand why. It was because of Ray Longstreth. Temptation assailed him. To have her as his wife, it seemed impossible. Thought was insidiously alluring. Dwayne pictured a home. He saw himself riding through the cotton and rice and cane, home to a stately old mansion where long-eared hounds bayed him welcome, and a woman looked for him and met him with happy and beautiful smile. There would be children, and something new, strange, and confounding with its emotion came to life deep inside Dwayne's heart. There'd be children, and Ray their mother. That kind of life a lonely outcast always yearned for and never had. He saw it all. He felt it all. But beyond and above all other claims came Captain McNelly's. It was then there was something cold and deathlike in Dwayne's soul. For he knew whatever happened, of one thing he was sure: he'd have to kill either Longstreth or Lawson. Longstreth might be trapped into arrest, but Lawson had no sense, no control, and no fear. He'd snarl like a panther and go for his gun, and he'd have to be killed. This, of all consummations, was the one to be calculated upon. Dwayne come out of it all bitter and callous and sore, in the most fitting of moods to undertake a difficult and deadly enterprise. He had fallen upon his old, strange, futile dreams, now rendered poignant by reason of love. He drove away those dreams. In their places came the images of the olive-skinned Longstreth with his sharp eyes, and the dark, evil-faced Lawson, and then returned tenfold more thrilling and sinister the old, strange passion to meet Poggin. It was about 1 o'clock when Dwayne rode into Fairdale. The streets, for the most part, were deserted. He went directly to find Morton and Zimmer. He found them at length, restless, somber, anxious, but unaware of the part he had played at Ord. They said Longstreth was home, too. It was possible that Longstreth had arrived home in ignorance. Dwayne told them to be on hand in town with their men in case he might need 'em, and then with teeth locked he set off for Longstreth's ranch. Dwayne stole through the bushes and trees, and when nearing the porch he heard loud, angry, familiar voices. Longstreth and Lawson were quarreling again. How Dwayne's lucky star guided him. He had no plan of action, but his brain was equal to 100 lightning swift evolutions. He meant to take any risk rather than kill Longstreth. Both of the men were out on the porch. Dwayne wormed his way to the edge of the shrubbery and crouched low to watch for his opportunity. Longstreth looked haggard and thin. He was in his shirt sleeves and had come out with his gun in hand. This he laid on the table near the wall. He wore no belt. Lawson was red, bloated, thick-lipped, all fiery and sweaty from drink, though sober at the moment. He had the expression of a desperate man in his last stand. It was his last stand, though he was ignorant of that. "What's your news? You needn't be afraid of my feelings," said Lawson. "Ray confessed to an interest in this ranger," replied Longstreth. Dwayne thought Lawson would choke. He was thick-necked anyway, and the rush of blood made him tear at the soft collar of his shirt. Dwayne awaited his chance, patient, cold, all his feelings shut in a vice. "But why should your daughter meet this ranger?" demanded Lawson harshly. "She's in love with him, and he's in love with her." Dwayne reveled in Lawson's condition. Statement might have had the force of a juggernaut. That statement might have had the force of a juggernaut. Was Longstreth sincere? What's his game? Lawson, finding his voice, cursed Ray and cursed the ranger, and then Longstreth. "You damn selfish fool," cried Longstreth in deep, bitter scorn. "All you think of is yourself, your loss of the girl. Think once of me, my home, my life." Then the connection suddenly put out by Longstreth apparently dawned upon by the other. Somehow through this girl her father and cousin were to be betrayed. Dwayne got that impression, though he could not tell how true it was. Certainly Lawson's jealousy was his paramount emotion. "To hell with you," burst out Lawson incoherently. He was frenzied. "I'll have her or nobody else will." "You never will," returned Longstreth stridently. "So help me God, I'd rather see her the ranger's wife than yours." While Lawson absorbed that shock, Longstreth leaned toward him, all of the hate and menace in his mien. "Lawson, you made me what I am," continued Longstreth. "I backed you, shielded you. You're Cheseldine. If the truth is told, now it's ended. I quit you. I'm done." Their gray, passion-corded faces were still as stones. "Gentlemen," Dwayne called in far-reaching voice as he stepped out, "you're both done." They wheeled to confront Dwayne. "Don't move, not a muscle, not a finger," he warned. Longstreth read what Lawson had not the mind to read. His face turned from gray to ashen. "What do you mean?" yelled Lawson fiercely and shrilly. It was not in him to obey a command, to see impending death. All quivering and strung, yet with perfect control, Dwayne raised his left hand to turn back a lapel of his open vest. The silver star flashed brightly. Lawson howled like a dog with barbarous and insane fury, with sheer, impotent folly. He swept a clawing hand for his gun. Dwayne's shot broke his action. Before Lawson even tottered, before he loosed his gun, Longstreth leaped behind him, clasped him with left arm quick as lightning, and jerked the gun from both clutching fingers and sheath. Longstreth protected himself with the body of the dead man. Dwayne saw red flashes and puffs of smoke. He heard quick reports. Something stung his left arm, and then a blow like wind and light of sound, yet shocking impact, struck him, staggered him. The hot rent of lead followed the blow. Dwayne's heart seemed to explode, yet his mind kept extraordinarily clear and rapid. Dwayne heard Longstreth work the action of Lawson's gun. He heard the hammer click and fall upon empty shells. Longstreth had used up all the loads in Lawson's gun. He cursed as a man cursed in defeat. Dwayne waited, cool and sure now. Longstreth tried to lift the dead man to edge him closer toward the table where his own gun lay, but considering the peril of exposing himself, he found the task beyond him. He bent, peering at Dwayne under Lawson's arm, which flopped out from the side. Longstreth's eyes were the eyes of a man who meant to kill. There was never any mistaking the strange and terrible light of eyes like those. More than once, Dwayne had a chance to aim at them, at the top of Longstreth's head, at the strip of his side. Longstreth flung Lawson's body off, but even as it dropped before Longstreth could leap, as surely intended for the gun, Dwayne covered him, called piercingly to him, "Don't jump for that gun. Don't. I'll kill you. Sure as God, I'll kill you." Longstreth stood perhaps 10 feet from the table where his gun lay. Dwayne saw him calculate his chances. He was game. He had the courage that forced Dwayne to respect him. Dwayne just saw him measure the distance to that gun. He was magnificent. He meant to do it. Dwayne would have to kill him. "Longstreth, listen," cried Dwayne swiftly. "The game's up. You're done. But think of your daughter. I'll spare your life. I'll try to get you freedom on one condition, for her sake. I've got you nailed, all the proof. There lies Lawson. You're alone. I've Morton and men to my aid. Give up. Surrender. Consent to demands, and I'll spare you. Maybe I can persuade McNally to let you go free back to your old country. It's for Ray's sake. Her life, perhaps her happiness, can be saved. Hurry, man. What's your answer?" "Suppose I refuse?" he queried with a dark and terrible earnestness. "Then I'll kill you in your tracks. You can't move a hand, your word, or death. Hurry, Longstreth. Be a man, for her sake. Quick. Another second now, I'll kill you." "All right, Buck Dwayne. I give you my word," he said, and deliberately walked to the chair and fell into it. Longstreth looked strangely at the bloody blot on Dwayne's shoulder. "There come the girls," he suddenly exclaimed. "Can you help me drag Lawson inside? They mustn't see him." Dwayne was facing down the porch toward the court and corrals, and Miss Longstreth and Ruth had come in sight, were swiftly approaching, evidently alarmed. The two men succeeded in drawing Lawson into the house before the girls saw him. "Dwayne, you're not hard hit?" said Longstreth. "Reckon not," replied Dwayne. "I'm sorry. If only you could have told me sooner. Lawson, damn him. Always a split over him. But the last time, Longstreth, yes. And I came near driving you to kill me too, Dwayne. You talked me out of it for Ray's sake. She'll be here in a minute. This'll be harder than facing a gun. Hard now, but it'll turn out all right. Dwayne, will you do me a favor?" he asked, and seemed shamed. "Sure." "Let Ray and Ruth think Lawson shot you. He's dead. It can't matter, Dwayne. The old side of my life is coming back. It's been coming. It'll be here just about when she enters the room, and by God, I'd change places with Lawson if I could." "Glad you said that," Longstreth replied Dwayne, "and sure, Lawson plugged me. It's our secret." Just then, Ray and Ruth entered the room. Dwayne heard two low cries, so different in tone, and he saw two white faces. Ray came to his side. She lifted a shaking hand to point at the blood upon his breast. White and mute, she gazed from that to her father. "Papa," cried Ray, wringing her hands. "Don't give way," he replied huskily. "Both you girls will need your nerve. Dwayne isn't badly hurt, but Floyd is dead. Listen, let me tell it quick. There's been a fight. It was Lawson. It was Lawson's gun that shot Dwayne. Dwayne let me off. In fact, Ray, he saved me. I'm dividing my property. Return so far as possible what I've stolen. Leave Texas at once with Dwayne under arrest. He says maybe he can get McNally, the ranger captain, to let me go for your sake." She stood there, realizing her deliverance, with the dark and tragic glory of her eyes passing from her father to Dwayne. "You must rise above this," said Dwayne to her. "I expect this to ruin you, but your father is alive. He will live it down. I'm sure I can promise you he'll be free. Perhaps back there in Louisiana the dishonor will never be known. This country is far from your old home, and even in San Antonio and Austin, a man's evil repute means little. Then the line between a rustler and a rancher is hard to draw in these wild border days. Rustling is stealing cattle, and once I've heard a well-known rancher say that all rich cattlemen had done a little stealing. Your father drifted out here, and like a good many others, he succeeded. It's perhaps just as well not to split hairs, to judge him by the law and morality of a civilized country. Somewhere or another, he drifted in with bad men. Maybe a deal that was honest somehow tied his hands. This matter of land, water, and a few stray head of stock had to be decided out of court. I'm sure in his case, never realized where he was drifting. Then one thing led to another until he was face to face with dealing that he took on a crooked form. To protect himself, he bound men to him, and so the gang developed. Many powerful gangs have developed that way out here. He could not control them. He became involved with them, and eventually their dealings became deliberately and boldly honest. That meant the inevitable spilling of blood sooner or later, and so he grew into the leader because he was the strongest. Whatever he's to be judged for, I think it could have been infinitely worse. On the morning of the 26th, Dwayne rode into Bradford in time to catch the early train. His wounds did not seriously incapacitate him. Longstreth was with him, and Miss Longstreth and Ruth Herbert would not be left behind. They're all leaving Fairdale forever. Longstreth had turned over the whole of his property to Morton, who was to divide it, and his comrades believed that was just. Dwayne had left Fairdale with his party by night, passed through Sanderson in the early hours of dawn, and reached Bradford as he planned. That fateful morning found Dwayne outwardly calm, but inwardly he was in tumult. He wanted to rush to Valverde. Would Captain McNally be there with his ranger, as Dwayne had planned them to be? Memory of that tawny Poggin returned with strange passion. Dwayne had borne hours and weeks and months of waiting, had endured long hours of the outlaw, but now he had no patience. The whistle of the train made him leap. It was a fast train, yet the ride seemed slow. Dwayne, disliking to face Longstreth and the passenger in the car, changed his seat to one behind the prisoner. They had seldom spoken. Longstreth sat with bowed head, deep in thought. The girls sat in a near seat by and were pale but composed. Occasionally the train halted briefly at a station. The latter half of the ride, Dwayne had observed a wagon road running parallel with the railroad, sometimes right alongside, at others or far away. When the train was about 20 miles from Valverde, Dwayne espied a dark group of horsemen trotting eastward. His blood beat like a hammer in his temples. It's the gang. He thought he recognized the tawny Poggin and felt a strange inward contraction. He thought he recognized the clean-cut Blossom Kane and the black-bearded giant Bolt. The red-faced Panhandle Smith and Fletcher. There was another man strange to him. Was that Nell? Nah, couldn't have been Nell. Dwayne leaned over the seat and touched Longstreth on the shoulder. Look, he whispered. Cheseldine was stiff. He'd already seen. The train flashed by. The outlaw gang receded out of range of sight. Did you notice Nell wasn't with him? Whispered Dwayne. Dwayne did not speak to Longstreth again till the train stopped at Valverde. They got off the car, and the girls followed as naturally and ordinary travelers. The station was a good deal larger than at Bradford, and there was considerable action and bustle incident to the arrival of a train. Dwayne's sweeping gaze searched faces, rested upon a man who seemed familiar. This fellow's look, too, was that of one who knew Dwayne, but was waiting for a sign, a cue. Then Dwayne recognized him. McNally. Clean-shaven, without a mustache, he appeared different, younger. When McNally saw that Dwayne intended to greet him, to meet him, he hurried forward. A keen light flashed from his eyes. He was glad, eager, yet suppressing himself, and the glances he sent back and forth from Dwayne to Longstreth were questioning and doubtful. Certainly Longstreth did not look the part of an outlaw. "Duane, Lord, I'm glad to see you," was the captain's greeting. Then a closer look into Duane's face as warmth fled. Something he saw there checked his enthusiasm, or at least in utterance. "McNelly, shake hand with Cheseldine," said Duane, low voice. The ranger captain stood dumb, motionless. He saw Longstreth's instant action awkwardly reach for the outstretched hand. "Any of your men down here?" queried Duane sharply. "Nope, they're uptown." "Come, McNelly, you walk with him. We've ladies in the party. I'll come behind with them." They set off uptown. Longstreth walked as if he were with friends on the way to dinner. The girls were mute. McNelly walked like a man in a trance. There was not a word spoken in 4 blocks. Presently, Duane espied a stone building on a corner of the broad street. There was a big sign, Rancher's Bank. "There was the hotel," said McNelly. "Some of my men are in there. We've scattered around. They're across the street." Went through the office and lobby, and then Duane asked McNelly to take them to the private room. Without a word, the captain complied. When they were all inside, Duane closed the door, and drawing a deep breath as if in relief, he faced them calmly. "Miss Longstreth, you and Miss Ruth try to make yourself comfortable now," he said, "and don't be distressed." Then he turned to the captain. "McNelly, this girl is the daughter of the man I brought you, and this one is his niece." Then Duane briefly related Longstreth's story, and though he did not spare the rustler chief, he was generous. "When I went after Longstreth," concluded Duane, "it was either kill him or offer him freedom on conditions, so I chose the latter for his daughter's sake. He has already disposed of all his property. I believe he'll live up to the condition. He's to leave Texas and never return. The name Cheseldine has been a mystery, and now it'll fade." A few moments later, Duane followed McNelly to a large room like a hall, and here were men reading and smoking. Duane knew them, Rangers. McNelly beckoned to his men. "Boys, here he is." "How many men have you?" asked Duane. 15. McNelly almost embraced Duane, would probably have done so, but for the dark grimness that seemed to be coming over the man. Instead, he glowed, he sputtered, he tried to talk and wave his hands. He was beside himself. And his rangers crowded closer, eager, like hounds ready to run. They all talked at once, and the word most significant and frequent in their speech was outlaws. McNelly clapped his fist in his hand. "This'll make the adjutant sick with joy. Maybe we won't have it on the governor. We'll show them about ranger service. Duane, how'd you ever do it?" "Now, Captain, not the half nor the quarter of this job's done. The gang's coming down the road. I saw them from the train. They'll ride into town on the dot, 2:30. "How many?" asked McNelly. "Poggin, Blossom, Kane, Panhandle Smith, Bolt, Jim Fletcher, and another man I don't know. They're the picked men of the Cheseldine's gang. I'll bet they'll be the fastest, hardest bunch of you Rangers ever faced." "Poggin, that's the hard nut to crack. I've heard their record since I've been in Valverde. Where's Nell? They say he's a boy, but hell and blazes, Nell's dead." "Ah," exclaimed McNelly softly. Then he grew businesslike, cool, and of a harder aspect. "Duane, it's your game today. I'm only a ranger under orders. We're all under your orders. We've absolute faith in you. Make your plan quick so I can go around and post the boys who are not here. You understand there's no sense in trying to arrest Poggin and Kane and that lot?" queried Duane. "No, I don't understand that," replied McNelly bluntly. "It can't be done. The drop can't be got on such men. If you meet them, shoot, and mighty quick and straight. Poggin, that outlaw, has no equal with a gun, unless he's got to be killed real quick. They'll all have to be killed. They're all bad, desperate. They don't know no fear, and they're lightning in action." "Very well, Duane, then it's a fight. That'll be easier, perhaps. The boys are spoiling for a fight. Out with your plan now." "Put one man at each end of the street, just at the edge of town. Let him hide there with a rifle to block the escape of any outlaw we might fail to get. I had a good look at the bank building. It's well situated for the purpose. Put 4 men up in the room over the bank. 4 men, 2 at each open window. Let them hide till the game begins. They want to be there, so in case these foxy outlaws get wise before they're down on the ground or inside the bank, the rest of your men put inside behind the counters, where they'll hide. Now go over to the bank and spring the thing on the bank officials, and don't let them shut up the bank. You want their aid. Let them make sure of their gold. But the clerks and the cashier ought to be there at their desks or window when Poggin rides up. He'll glance in before he gets down. They'll make no mistakes. We must be slicker than they are, or we'll lose. When you get the bank people wise, send your men over one by one. No hurry, no excitement, no unusual thing to attract notice in the bank. All right, that's great. Tell me, where do you intend to wait? Duane heard McNally's question, and it struck him as peculiar. He had seemed to be planning and speaking mechanically, as he was confronted by the fact that nonplussed him somewhat, and he became thoughtful with a lowered head. Where'll you wait, Duane? Insisted McNally with keen eyes speculating. I'll wait in front, just inside the door, replied Duane with an effort. Why? Demanded Captain. Well, Duane began slowly, Poggin will get down first and start in, but the others won't be far behind. They'll not get swift till inside. The thing is, they mustn't get clear inside, because the instant they do, they'll pull guns. That means death to somebody. If we want to stop 'em, we do it at the door. But will you hide? Asked McNally. Hide? The idea hadn't even occurred to Duane. There's a wide open doorway, a sort of round hall, vestibule with steps leading up to the bank. There's a door in the vestibule, too. It leads somewhere. We can put men in there. You can be there. Duane was silent. See here, Duane, began McNally nervously. You shan't take any undue risk here. You'll hide with the rest of us. No, the word was wrenched from Duane. McNally stared, and then a strange, comprehending light seemed to fit over his face. Duane, I can give you no orders today, he said distinctly. I'm offering you advice. Need you take any more risks? You done a grand job for the service already. You paid me 1,000 times for that pardon. You redeemed yourself. The governor, the adjutant general, and the whole state will rise up in honor of you. The game's almost up. We'll kill these outlaws, or enough of them to break forever their power. I say as a ranger, need you take more risks than your captain. Still, Duane remained silent. He was locked between two forces, and one a tide that was bursting at his bounds and seemed about to overwhelm him. Finally, that side of him, retreating self, the weaker, found a voice. Captain, you want this job to be sure? He asked. Certainly. I've told you the way. I alone know the kind of men that we're going to meet. Just what'll I'll do and where I'll be, I can't say yet. In meetings like this, the moment decides, but I'll be there. McNally spread his wide hands, looked helplessly at his curious and sympathetic ranger, and shook his head. Now you done your work, laid the trap. Is this strange move of yours going to be fair to Miss Longstreth? Asked McNally in a significant low voice. Like a great tree chopped at the roots, Duane vibrated to that. He looked up as if he'd seen a ghost. Mercilessly, the ranger captain went on. You can win her, Duane. You can't fool me. I was wise in a minute. Fight with us from cover, and then go back to her. You have served the Texas Ranger as no man ever has. I'll accept your resignation. You'll be free, honored, happy. That girl loves you. I saw it in her eyes. But Duane cut him short with a fierce gesture. He lunged up to his feet, and the Rangers fell back, dark, silent, grim as he had been. Still, there was a transformation singularly more sinister, stranger. Enough. I'm done, he said somberly. I planned. Do we agree, or shall I meet Pog and his gang alone?" McNelly cursed and again threw up his hands, this time in baffled chagrin. There was deep regret in his dark eyes as they rested upon Dwayne. Dwayne was left alone. Never had his mind been so quick, so clear, so wonderful in its understanding of what heretofore been intricate and elusive impulses of a strange nature. His determination was to meet Poggin, meet him before anyone else had a chance. Poggin first, and then the others. He was unalterable in that decision, and as if in an instance of his acceptance, he had become stone. Why? Then came the realization. He was not a ranger now. He cared nothing for the state. He had no thought of freeing the community of dangerous outlaw or ridding the country of an obstacle to its progress and prosperity. He wanted to kill Poggin. It was significant now that he had forgot the other outlaws. He was the gunman, the gun thrower, the gunfighter, passionate and terrible, his father's blood. That dark and fierce strain, his mother's spirit, that strong and unquenchable spirit of the surviving pioneer. These had been in him, and the killings, one after another, the wild and haunted years had made him, absolutely in spite of his will, the gunman. He realized it now, bitterly and hopelessly, the thing he had intelligence enough to hate he had become. At least he shuddered under the driving, ruthless, and human bloodlust of the gunman. Long ago he seemed to seal in a tomb that horror of his kind, the need in order to forget the haunting, sleepless presence of his last victim, to go out and kill another. It was still there in his mind, and now it stalked out, worse, more powerful, magnified by its rest, augmented by the violent passions peculiar and inevitable to that strange wild product of the Texas frontier, the gunfighter. And those passions were so violent, so raw, so base, so much lower than what ought to have existed in a thinking man. Actual pride of his record, actual vanity in his speed with a gun, actual jealousy of any rival. Dwayne could not believe it, but there it was, without a choice. What he feared for years had become a monstrous reality. Respect for himself, blindness, a certain honor that he had clung to while in outlawry, all, like scales, seemed to fall away from him. He stood stripped bare, his soul naked, the soul of Cain. Always since the first brand had been forced and burned upon him, he had been ruined. But now, with conscience flayed to the quick, yet utterly powerless over the tiger instinct, he was lost. He said it, he admitted it, and the utter abasement, the soul he despised, suddenly leaped and quivered with the thought of Ray Longstreth. Then came agony. As he could not govern all the chances of his fatal meeting, as all swift and deadly genius might be occupied with Poggin, perhaps in vain, as hard-shooting men whom he could not watch would be close behind. This almost certainly must be the end of Buck Dwayne. That did not matter. But he loved the girl. He wanted her. All her sweetness, her fire and pleading returned to torture him. At that moment the door opened and Ray Longstreth entered. "Dwayne," he said softly, "Cap McNelly sent me to you." "But you shouldn't have come," replied Dwayne. "As soon as he told me to have to come, whether he wished it or not, you left me all of us stunned. I had no time to thank you." "Oh, I do with all my soul. It was noble of you." Father is overcome. He didn't expect so much, and he'll be true, but... Dwayne, I was told to hurry, and here I'm selfishly using time. Go then, leave me. You mustn't unnerve me now when there's a desperate game to finish." "Need it be desperate?" she whispered, coming close to him. "Yes. It can't be anything else." McNelly had sent her to weaken him. Of that Dwayne was sure, and he felt that she had wanted to come. Her eyes were dark, strained, beautiful. and they shed a light upon Dwayne he'd never seen before. "You're going to take some mad risk," she said. "Let me persuade you not to. You said you cared for me, and well, Dwayne, don't you know?" The low voice, deep, sweet as an old chord, faltered and broke and failed. Dwayne sustained a sudden shock and an instant of paralyzed confusion of thought. She moved, she swept up her hands, and the wonder of her eyes dimmed in a flood of tears. "My God, can't you care for me?" she cried hoarsely. Then she met him, hands outstretched. "But I do." Swift as a light, Dwayne caught her and held her to his breast. He stood holding her tight, with the feel of her warm, throbbing breast and the clasp of her arms as flesh and blood, realities to fight a terrible fear. He felt her, and for the moment the might of it was stronger than all the demons that possessed him. And he held her as if he'd been holding his soul, his strength on earth, his hope of heaven against his lips. The strife of doubt all past, he found his sight again, and there rushed over him a tide of emotion, unutterably sweet and full, strong like an intoxicating wine, deep as his nature, something glorious and terrible as the blaze of the sun. To one long in darkness, he had become an outcast, a wanderer, a gunman, a victim of circumstances. He had lost and suffered worse than death in that loss. He had gone down the endless bloody trail, a killer of men, fugitive whose mind slowly, inevitably closed to all except the instinct to survive in a black despair. And now, with this woman in his arms, her swelling breast against his, and this moment almost of resurrection, he bent under the storm of passion and joy, possibly only to him who had endured so much. "Do you care a little?" he whispered unsteadily. He bent over, looking deep into her dark, wet eyes. She uttered a low laugh that was half sob, and her arm slipped up to his neck. "A little, Dwayne. A great deal." Their lips met in their first kiss. The sweetness, the fire of her mouth seemed so new, so strange, so irresistible to Dwayne. His sore, hungry heart throbbed with thick and heavy beats. He felt the outcast's need for love, and he gave up the enthralling moment. She met him halfway, returned kiss for kiss, clasp for clasp. Her scarlet face and her eyes closed till her passionate strength spent. She fell back upon his shoulder. Dwayne suddenly thought she was going to faint. He divined that she had understood him and would have denied him nothing, not even her life in that moment, but she was overcome and suffered a pang of regret at his unrestraint. Presently she recovered, and she drew only closer and leaned upon him with her face upturned. He felt her hands on his, and they were soft, clinging, strong like steel under velvet. He felt the rise and fall warmth of her breasts, and a tremor ran over him. He tried to draw back, and if he succeeded a little, her form swayed with him, pressing closer. She held her face up, and he was compelled to look. It was wonderful now, white yet glowing, with red lips parted and dark eyes alluring. But that was not all. There was passion, unquenchable spirit, a woman's resolve, deep and mighty. "I love you, Dwayne," she said. "For my sake, don't go out to meet this outlaw face to face. It's something wild in you. Conquered if you love me." Dwayne became suddenly weak, and when he did take her into his arms again, he scarcely had strength to lift her to the seat beside him. She seemed more than dead weight. Her calmness had fled. She was throbbing, palpitating, quivering, with hot, wet cheeks and arms that clung to him like vines. She lifted her mouth to his, whispering, "Kiss me." She meant to change him, hold him. Dwayne bent down, and her arms went around his neck and drew him close. With his lips on hers, he seemed to float away. That kiss closed his eyes, and He could not lift his head. He sat motionless, holding her, blind and helpless. Wrapped in sweet, dark glory, she kissed him one long, endless kiss, or else 1,000 times. Her lips, her wet cheeks, her hair, the softness, the fragrance, the tender clasp of her arms, the swell of her breast, all these things seemed to enclose him. Dwayne could not put her from him. He yielded to her lips and arms, watching her, involuntarily returning her caress, sure now of her intent, fascinated by the sweetness of her, bewildered, almost lost. This is what it was to be loved by a woman. His years of outlawry had blotted out any boyish love he might have known. This is what he had to give up, all this wonder of her sweet person, this strange fire he feared yet loved, this mate his deep and tortured soul recognized. Never until that moment had he divined the meaning of a woman to a man. That meaning was physical inasmuch that he learned what beauty was, what marvel in the touch of quickening flesh. And it was spiritual in that he saw there might have been for him, under happier circumstances, a life of noble deeds lived for such a woman. Don't go, she cried and started violently. I must, dear. Goodbye. Remember, I loved you. He pulled her hands loose from his and stepped back. Ray, dearest, I believe I'll come back, he whispered. These last words were falsehood. He reached the door and gave her one last piercing glance to fix forever in memory that white face with its dark, staring, tragic eyes. Dwayne! He fled with that moan like thunder, death hell in his ears. To forget her, to get back his nerve, he forced his mind the image of Poggin. Poggin, the tawny-haired, the yellow-eyed like a jaguar with its rippling muscles. He brought back his sense of the outlaw's wonderful presence. He owned unaccountable fear and hate. Yes, Poggin had sent the cold sickness of fear to his marrow. Why, since he hated life so? Poggin was his supreme test, and this abnormal and stupendous instinct, now deep as the very foundation of his life, demanded its wild and fatal issue. There was a horrible thrill in this sudden remembrance that Poggin likewise had been taunted in fear of him. So the dark tide overwhelmed Dwayne, and when he left the room, he was fierce, implacable, steeled to any outcome, quick like a panther, somber as death in the thrall of his strange passion. There was no excitement in the street. He crossed to the bank corner. A clock inside pointed to the hour of 2. He went through the door into the vestibule, looked around, passed up the steps into the bank. Clerks were at their desks, apparently busy, but they showed nervousness. The cashier paled at the sight of Dwayne. There were men, the Rangers, crouching down behind the low partition. All the windows had been removed from the iron grating before the desk. The safe was closed. There was no money in sight. The customer came in, spoke to the cashier, and was told to come back tomorrow. Dwayne returned to the door. He could see far down the street out into the country. There he waited, and minutes were eternity. He saw no person near him. He heard no sound. He was insulated in his unnatural strain. At a few minutes before 2:30, a dark, compact body of horsemen appeared far down, turning into the road. They came to a sharp trot, a group that would have attracted attention anywhere at any time. They came in a little faster as they entered town, then faster still. Now they were 4 blocks away, now 3, now 2. Dwayne backed down the middle of the vestibule, up the steps, and halted in the center of the wide doorway. There seemed to be a rushing in his ears through which pierced sharp, ringing clip-clop of iron hooves. He could see only the corner of the street, but suddenly into that shot lean-limbed, dusty bay horses. There was a clattering of nervous hooves pulled to a halt. Dwayne saw the tawny Poggin speak to his companions. He dismounted quickly. They followed suit. They had the manner of ranchers about to conduct some business. No gun showed. Poggin started leisurely for the bank door, quickening his step a little. The others, close together, came behind him. Blossom Kane had a bag in his left hand. Jim Fletcher was left at the curb, and he had already gathered up the bridles. Poggin entered the vestibule first, with Kane on one side, Bolt on the other, a little at his rear. As he strode in, he saw Duane. "Hell's fire!" he cried. Something inside Duane burst, piercing all of them with cold. Was it fear? "Buck Duane!" echoed Kane. One instant, Poggin looked up at Duane, looked down. Like a striking jaguar, Poggin moved almost as quickly as Duane threw his arm. The guns boomed almost together. Duane felt a blow just before he pulled the trigger. His thoughts came fast like strange dots before his eyes. His rising gun had loosened in his hand. Poggin had drawn quicker. A tearing agony encompassed his breast. He pulled and pulled. It ran, a thunder of booming shots all about him, red flashes, jets of smoke, shrill yells. He was sinking. The end. Yes, the end. With fading sight, he saw Kane go down, then Bolt. But supreme torture, bitterer than death, Poggin stood, maned like a lion's back to the wall, bloody-faced, grand, with his gun spouting red. All faded, darkened. The thunder deadened. Duane fell, seemed floating. There it drifted, Ray Longstreth's sweet face, white with dark, tragic eyes, fading from his sight, fading. Light shone before Duane's eyes, thick, strange light that came and went. For a long time, dull and booming sounds rushed by, filling all. It was a dream in which there was nothing, a drifting under a burden. Darkness, light, sound, movement, and vague, obscure sense of time that was very long. There was fire creeping, consuming fire. A dark cloud of flame enveloped him and rolled him away. He saw then dimly in a room that was strange people moving about and over him with faint voices far away, things in a dream. He saw again clearly, and consciousness returned, still unreal, still strange, full of those vague and far-away things, that he was not dead. He lay stiff like a stone, with a weight ponderous as a mountain upon him, and all his body bound, racked in slow, dull, beating agony. A woman's face hovered over him, white and tragic-eyed, like one of his old haunting phantoms, yet sweet and eloquent. Then a man's face bent over him, looked into his eyes, and seemed to whisper from a distance, "Duane, Duane." He knew me. After that, there was another long interval of darkness. When the light came again, clearer at this time, the same earnest-faced man bent over him. It was McNelly. And with the recognition, the past flooded back. Duane tried to speak. His lips were weak, and he could scarcely move them. "Poggin," he whispered. His first real conscious thought was for Poggin, ruling passion, eternal instinct. "Poggin's dead. Duane shot to pieces," replied McNelly solemnly. "What a fight he made. Killed 2 of my men, wounded others. God, he was a tiger. He used up 3 guns before we downed him." "Who got away?" "Fletcher, the man with the horses. We downed all the others, Duane. The job's done. It's done. Why, man, what of her? Miss Longstreth has been almost constantly at your bedside. She helped the doctor. She watched your wounds. And Duane, the other night when you sank low, so low I think was her spirit that held yours back. She's a wonderful girl, Duane. She never gave up. Never lost her nerve for a moment. Well, we're going to take you home and she'll go with us. Colonel Longstreth left for Louisiana right after the fight. I advised it. There was a great excitement. It was best for him to leave. Have I got a chance to recover?" "Chance? Why, man," exclaimed the captain, "you'll get well. You'll pack a sight of lead all your life, but you can stand that. Duane, the whole Southwest knows your story. You need never again be ashamed of the name Buck Duane. The brand outlaw's washed out. Texas believes you've been a secret ranger the whole time. You're a hero. And now think of your home, your mother, of this noble girl, of your future. The Rangers took Dwayne home to Wellston. A railroad had been built since Dwayne had gone into exile, and Wellston had grown. A noisy crowd surrounded the station, but it stilled as Dwayne was carried from the train. A sea of faces pressed close. Some were faces he remembered, schoolmates, friends, old neighbors. There was an uplifting of many hands. Dwayne was being welcomed home to the town from which he fled. A deadness within him broke. This welcome hurt him somehow, quickened him, and through his cold being, his weary mind passed a change. His sight dimmed. There was a white house, his old home, how strange, yet how real. His heart beat fast. Had so many, many years passed. Familiar yet strange it was, and all seemed magnified. They carried him in, these ranger comrades, and laid him down, and lifted his head up on top of pillows. The house was still, though full of people. Dwayne's gaze sought the open door. Someone entered. A tall girl in white with dark wet eyes and a light upon her face. She was leading an old lady, gray-haired, austere-faced, somber and sad. His mother. She was feeble, but she walked erect. She was pale, shaking, and maintained her dignity. The someone in white uttered a low cry and knelt by Dwayne's bed. His mother flung her arms wide with a strange gesture. This man, they've not brought back my boy. This man's the father. Where's my son? My son, oh, my son. When Dwayne grew stronger, it was a pleasure to lie by the west window and watch Uncle Jim whittle his stick and listen to his talk. The old man was broken now, and he told many interesting things about people Dwayne had known. People had grown up and married and failed and succeeded and gone away and died. But it was hard to keep Uncle Jim off the subject of guns, outlaws, and fights. He could not seem to divine how mention of these things hurt Dwayne. Uncle Jim was childish now, and he had great pride in his nephew. He wanted to hear all of Dwayne's exile. And if there was one thing more than another that pleased him, it was to talk about the bullets which Dwayne carried in his body. 5 bullets, he asked, for the 100th time. 5 in the last scrap, by God. You had 6 before? Yes, Uncle, replied Dwayne. 5 and 6. That makes 11, by gum. A man's a man to carry all that lead. But you could carry more. There's that Edwards right here in Wellston. He's got a ton of bullets in him. Doesn't seem to mind them none. And there's Cole Miller. I've seen him. Been a bad man his day. They say he packs 23 bullets. But he's bigger than you. Got more flesh. Funny, wasn't it, Buck, about the doctor and only being able to cut 1 bullet out of you? That one by your breastbone? 41 caliber. That's an unusual cartridge. I saw it, and I wanted it, but Miss Longstress wouldn't part with it. Buck, there was a bullet left in one of Poggin's guns, and that bullet was the same kind as the one that they cut out of you, by gum. Boy, it'd have killed you if you stayed there. It would indeed, Uncle, replied Dwayne. The old haunting, somber mood returned. But Dwayne was not often at the mercy of childish old hero-worshipping Uncle Jim. Miss Longstreth was the only person who seemed to divine Dwayne's gloomy mood, and when she was with him, she warded off all suggestion. One afternoon, while she was there at the west window, a message came for him. They read it together. You've saved the Ranger's service to the Lone Star State. Signed, McAnally. Ray knelt beside him at the window and believed she meant to speak then of the thing she had shunned, her Face was still white, but sweeter now, warm with rich life beneath the marble, and her dark eyes were still intent, still haunted by shadows, but no longer tragic. I'm glad for McNally's sake that, as the states, Dwayne. She made no reply to that and seemed to be thinking deeply. Dwayne shrank a little. The pain, is it any worse today? She asked insistently. Nah, it's the same. It will always be the same. I'm full of lead, you know, but I don't mind a little pain. Then it's the old mood, the fear, she whispered. Tell me. Yeah, still haunts me. I'll be well soon. I'll be able to go out. Then that hell will come back. No, she said with emotion. Some drunken cowboy, some fool with a gun will hunt me out in every town wherever I go, he went on miserably. Buck Duane, to kill Buck Duane. Hush, don't speak so. Listen. Remember that day in Valverde when I came to you, pled with you not to meet Poggin? That was a terrible hour for me, but it showed me the truth. Saw the struggle between your passion to kill and your love for me. I could have saved you then, and had I known what I know now, but I understand that the thing that haunts you, but you'll never have to draw again. You'll never have to kill another man, thank God. Like a drowning man, he would have grasped at straws, but he would not give his voice passionate query. She put tender arms around his neck. Because you'll have me with you always, she replied. Because always I shall be between you and that terrible thing. It seemed the spoken thought, absolute assurance of her power came to her. Duane realized instantly that he was in the arms of a stronger woman, that she had pled with him on that fatal day. Well, we'll be married and leave Texas, she said softly, with the red blood rising rich and dark in her cheeks. Ray, yes, we will, though you're laggard in asking me, sir. But, dear, suppose, he replied huskily, suppose there might be children, a boy with his father's blood. I pray God there will be, and I do not fear what you fear, but even so, he'll be half my blood. Duane felt the storm rise and break him. His terror was that of joy quelling fear. The shining glory of love in this woman's eyes made him weak as a child. How could she love him? How could she so bravely face a future with him? Yet she held him in her arms, twining her hands round his neck and pressing close to him, her faith and love and beauty. These she meant to throw between him and all that terrible past. They were her power, and she meant to use them all. He dared not think of accepting her sacrifice. But Ray, you dear noble girl, I'm poor. I got nothing, and I'm a cripple. Oh, you'll be well some day, she replied, and listen, I got money. My mother left me well off. All she had was her father's. Do you understand? We'll take Uncle Jim and your mom. We'll go to Louisiana to my old home. It's far from here. There's a plantation to work, and there are horses and cattle. A great cypress forest to cut. Oh, you'll have much to do. You'll forget there. You'll learn to love my home. It's a beautiful place. There are groves where the gray moss blows all day and the nightingales sing all night. My darling, cried Duane brokenly, no. Yet he knew in his heart that he was yielding to her, and he could not resist her a moment longer. What was this madness of love? We'll be happy, she whispered. I know. Come now, come. Her eyes were closing, heavily lidded, and she lifted sweet, tremulous, waiting lips, and with a bursting heart, Duane bent to them. Then he held her close and pressed to him, while with dim eyes he looked out over the line of low hills in the west. down where the sun was setting gold and red, down over the Nueces and wild breaks of the Rio Grande, which he is never to see again. It was in this solemn and exalted moment that Duane accepted happiness and faced a new life, trusting this brave and tender woman to be stronger than the dark and fateful passion that had shadowed his past. It would come back, that wind of flame, that madness to forget, that driving, relentless instinct for blood. It would come back with those pale, drifting, haunting faces and the accusing, fading eyes, but all his life, always between them and him, rendering them powerless, would be the faith and love and beauty of this noble woman.